Hey guys! Welcome to the HistoReddit channel. In today's video, we're going to explore the amazing world of entitled parenting stories shared on the r/entitledparents subreddit. Prepare to be shocked by real reports of narcissistic and absurd behaviors committed by some parents. In the first account, we're introduced to a frightening situation at a shooting range, where an authorized parent and his son pulled a gun on one of the subreddit's members. The story involves confrontations with security guards and the police, showing how irresponsible attitudes can put lives in danger. Then we'll delve into a story involving an entitled aunt who abuses her own nephew to solve her problems and satisfy her whims. We'll see how young Emily's courage in confronting her aunt resulted in a surprising twist and justice being done. These stories show the dark side of some parents and relatives who believe they have the right to control and exploit their children and family members. It is important to reflect on mutual respect, healthy boundaries, and recognition of individual rights. I'd like to remind everyone that the r/entitledparents subreddit is a supportive and respectful space. When visiting it, it is essential to be respectful and avoid any form of ridicule. Appreciate the stories cautiously and learn from them. If you like these shocking stories and want to watch more fascinating content like this, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Leave your like and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our next videos. Now, I invite you to prepare yourselves for these impactful stories of entitled parents. Let's start. Welcome to our r/entitled parents video. We have a story about a mother and her precious son pulling a gun on me. The next account is of Spartan with a gun. This happened last week and I'm still trying to figure out what happened. First, let me say that I love guns, almost everything about them, the sound, the recoil, the fireball. What I don't like is when stupid people have guns, as it can lead to the death of innocent people. So when I see an empowered parent and their 9-year-old son in a shooting range, I was initially happy, thinking the kid was being taught about guns at an early age. I went to my space next to the father and son, who were very friendly. However, my joy disappeared when I saw the father's gun pointed at me. Immediately, I jumped out of the way and asked him to keep the gun down. The mother mocked me, pulled the empty trigger, and I said it doesn't matter, we must always treat it as if it was loaded. I was armed with 2 weapons, my Springfield XD-40 subcompact pistol and my AR-15. The story continues with the boy going up to shoot, and when he's finished, he lowers the gun, pointing it at me. Since he was just a kid and probably inexperienced, I told him to always keep the barrel low for safety. He understood and pointed the gun down. It was then that I felt a strong slap on the back of my head. The boy's mother assaulted me and told me not to talk to her son like that because she was trying to teach him about gun safety. I was shocked by her attitude and, to protect myself, I put my hand on my XD-40, which was on the table. That made her back off. When she prepared to fire again, she pulled the trigger, but nothing happened. She pointed the gun at me again, and this time I yelled at her to keep the barrel low. However, she decided to ignore me and continued with her inappropriate behavior. It was then that I resumed shooting with my gun. Once again, I realized that her gun was pointed at me. And what's worse is that she was pulling the trigger. For those who don't know, the rule is that we can only point a gun at someone if we feel that life is really in danger. I wasn't in that situation yet, so I called the booth security team. They scolded her, but she repeated the same behavior. At that point, I pointed my gun at her and scolded her, telling her to keep her gun away from me. The security team arrived and took the gun from the authorized parent. Then her father tried to confront me, but I grabbed her gun and discharged it. I explained that it was just an emergency measure. I noticed that the safety was on, but the gun was fully loaded. So I pointed my gun at the authorized parent and ordered him to kneel with his hands behind his head. She told him that she was going to sue him for his actions. Meanwhile, the authorized mother kept screaming, claiming murder, as she was taken away by the officers. The child was crying and I went to her to calm her down. The entitled father was still screaming, accusing me of trying to kidnap his son. I just walked away, and the child calmed down. The policeman closed the car and wrote down our contacts. The father is still awaiting the court date. I'll keep you updated, but for now let me just say don't let your kids nearly kill you. Our next account is from Acker. My aunt always acted like the truth teller, solving people's problems at my cousin's expense. If anyone tried to pay for her help, the entitled aunt kept the money. She played my cousin babysitter, maid, lawn mower, and handyman. Apparently, my cousin's existence was only to fulfill her aunt's wishes. My mother couldn't stand her younger sister, so we always tried to avoid her, although we still kept in touch with her husband and her son, my uncle. He lived in another city, so we rightfully avoided his aunt when we went to visit them. On this trip, I was staying with my cousin for a few weeks in the summer, and we planned to do touristy things together. But the aunt rightly thought that, as the university was not in session, my cousin would be her slave. One day, Emily, my cousin, decided enough was enough. She refused to do her aunt a favor and said she had other plans. But, as usual, the mother acted as if Emily had agreed and expected to comply. However, Emily did not do the favor for her friend as her aunt demanded. My mom and I arrived about 10 minutes before the phone rang. The aunt called and started screaming so loudly that we could clearly hear both sides of the conversation. The aunt with the right was embarrassed by her friend and called us insolent. She demanded that Emily immediately apologize and grounded her for a month, saying that Emily would not be able to use the car. My mother tried to intervene, explaining that Emily was an adult and no longer living with her aunt. She said that Emily was not allowed to speak, that she owed her mother respect and that she was obligated to do what she said. My mother was worried about leaving us in this situation, but deep down she knew what her aunt was like. We left the house right after meeting Emily's boyfriend and went to have fun at a water park and other places. When we got back home, we were talking about where to have dinner. My mother insisted on paying for a very good dinner that night. When we returned, Emily's car was gone. She called to ask where the car was. The entitled aunt said that she had it and that she had taken it to check that Emily had obeyed her. She stated that Emily was grounded and that she couldn't use the car because she had disobeyed. Emily argued that she owned the car and that her aunt had no right to take it. The aunt insisted that Emily must respect and obey her because she was her mother. Emily finally told her that, as she was 22, she was no longer living under her mother's guardianship and that she could mind her own business. The aunt was shocked and looked at me as if I was to blame. She then realized that I was responsible for Emily taking this action. She ordered us to get out of her house. She said she didn't give us permission to visit and asked where my mother was. Emily replied that she didn't need her aunt's permission and that she could travel without her mother present. The aunt was outraged and said that she would call the police, claiming that the car had been taken without permission. She also asked where Mike's boyfriend, my uncle, was. Emily took us to his house, but we decided not to waste time with her aunt and left. The police were called and knocked on the aunt's door. They explained that the vehicle matched the description of a stolen car and asked to speak to Emily. The entitled aunt tried to argue, saying that she was her mother and that she had the right to take her daughter's car. However, the cops showed Emily's car registration and license. They made it clear that the car belonged to Emily and that her aunt had no right to use or take it without permission. The aunt was furious, took Emily's license, tore it to pieces, and slammed the door. The officers looked at each other for a moment and then shrugged. They rang the bell again and ordered the aunt to return the license. The aunt threw the pieces of license on the floor and refused to cooperate. The officers then arrested her for destruction of property. It was a surreal scene. As the aunt was taken away by the police, she looked at Emily with a look of victory. It was then that we realized it had all been a terrible scheme. The aunt thought she had one, but soon found out I was a hacker. She questioned my presence and I replied that she was just trying to have a nice visit with my cousin. She ordered us to leave and said she didn't want to see us anymore. I told her that I didn't need her permission and that I wasn't afraid of her. The aunt started to get irritated and realized that she was about to be arrested for destroying Emily's license. She stated that she was Emily's mother and that she had the right to do whatever she wanted. The officers explained that she had rights, but also duties, and that destroying a valid license was a crime. They informed her that she would be fined, but because she destroyed the license, she could face a more serious charge. We returned home a week later, with the aunt eventually settling for a plea deal. She was sentenced to spend 2 years away from her children. To her, her children were like modern-day slaves, but justice was finally served. These entitled parents treated their children as if they were property, without respecting their individual rights. Fortunately, Emily had the courage to stand up to her mother and seek justice. I hope you enjoyed these parenting stories with entitlement. Remember to respect the r/entitledparents subreddit when you visit. These stories are shared in support and should not be ridiculed. If you enjoyed the content, I recommend checking out the subreddit in person, but remember to be respectful and just observe without posting unless you have a relevant story to share. And finally, I hope you don't get electrocuted.